Please be seated. State, call your next witness, please.
Okay, we'll call Christopher Comarn.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Christopher Comarn. My first name is spelled C-H-R-I-S-T-O-P-H-E-R. Last name is Comarn, spelled C-O-M as in Mary, A-R.
May inquire.
Good afternoon, Mr. Comarn. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well, thank you for asking. Where do you work?
I work for the Broward County Sheriff's Office Crime Laboratory, which is located on the first floor of actually the courthouse, this facility, and I work in the DNA unit as a forensic DNA analyst.
Okay, I want to start with, what are the qualifications to hold that position?
The job requires specialized training, and I have training in the area of forensic serology, which is the identification of stains indicative of blood or semen, and I'm also trained to look for evidence that may contain contact DNA, which is cells originating from the skin. And I completed my training with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement at the Tallahassee Regional Crime Lab back in 1997. And I've been a caseworking analyst with the FDLE from 1997 to 2000. And when I joined the Broward Sheriff's Office, I've been an analyst in the caseworking unit. And during this time, I have always maintained my qualifications by taking continuing education at a minimum of 8 hours every year in order to maintain my qualifications, as well as proficiency testing, which is taken twice a year to maintain my qualifications. And to further answer your question, Counselor, I also have a Bachelor of Science degree from Florida State University in the area of forensic biology. I'm sorry, not forensic biology, in biology. And I have a master's degree that I earned in 2004, from the University of Central Florida in forensic science biochemistry track.
And have you ever had any other employment in this field besides the Sheriff's Office?
I worked with the FDLE for 5 years as a forensic technologist in the databasing unit, as well as a trainee and an analyst in the caseworking unit for 4 years at FDLE. And then prior to that, I had clinical laboratory experience with a state laboratory in Jacksonville, Florida, where I was using a test called a probe competition assay for the identification of human disease using a DNA-based test.
Are you a member of any professional organizations with regards to DNA and biology?
Yes, I am.
And what are those?
I'm currently a member of the American Academy of Forensic Science.
And have you attended professional meetings, conferences, seminars?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I attended a meeting with the American Academy of Forensic Science earlier this year, and I have also taken continuing education and training this year as well.
And can you please list and describe your training in statistics as it relates to DNA?
As part of my master's program, I did take 2 statistics courses. The last one was taught by Dr. Weir, and this was with UCF, and it's specifically in the area of forensics. And the statistics encompass the training in the area of population databases, as well as the calculations that are used. This includes a calculation known as a random match probability, also known as a product rule, and we also analyzed, being a colleague of mine and I, took training in an area called the likelihood ratio.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would submit the witness for the defense for voir dire on the areas of population, genetics, statistics, and DNA testing and serology.
No questions, Your Honor.
Go ahead. So, Mr. Comarn, with regards to the responsibilities of your job and the forensic lab downstairs, what do you do?
I'm a specialist, and I don't do analysis in firearms or fingerprints. My speciality is really in the examination of evidence that may contain a biological fluid or cells from a person. And my job is to try to obtain a DNA profile from the evidence and determine who could or could not have contributed to the stain that has been recovered.
Approximately how many times have you done that?
Ever since the beginning of my career, really, since 1997.
So you talked a little bit about proficiency testing. How is that tested?
A proficiency test is a test of my competence as well as my laboratory's procedures, and it is a test that is administered by an outside provider who provides a set of biological samples, typically blood or semen, or both, that are contained within a kit. Now, I do not know the answers to this test. I take the test following my laboratory protocols. I issue my findings in the form of a report that's given to the test provider. The test provider then compares my results to my peers in my laboratory as well as to participants from other crime labs to see if I obtained an answer that's consistent with what the community has obtained. And if I have, I'm allowed to continue doing casework. And if I have not, then the remediation process begins to determine whether or not the issue is with the laboratory's procedures or with my testing.
And does the interpretation of your results require interpretation of a statistical nature?
Currently, no. It doesn't require statistics for the outside provider. Then the reason part of this is, I believe, is because there are a number of different statistical approaches that can be taken, and some of these are dependent on assumptions that are made.
Now, is there a DNA database that you use with regards to the population, genetics, and statistics?
Yes, there is.
And what is the source of that?
There are two databases that I've used. The first is from the FBI, and that is a database that was published back in 2001 in the Journal of Forensic Sciences. And the database contains frequencies of how often a particular DNA trait exists within the population. And the more recent database that I've used is from the NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that has a database that's published for use in forensics as well as paternity testing.
You said, what is a trait? Can you explain to the jury what a genetic trait is?
There are genetic traits that we see, physical characteristics such as eye color or skin color, and there are invisible traits that we cannot see, which are variations that exist within a person's DNA. Now, 99.9% of DNA between individuals is going to be practically the same. On average, we only vary by one base pair per 1,000 in the human genome. And so as a forensic scientist, what I do is I look at areas of the DNA that have been studied for forensics as well as paternity testing that examine what are known as tetranucleotide repeats. These are sequences that repeat in tandem, and the number of times they repeat from person to person may vary. And I analyze 15 different areas of a person's chromosomal makeup to determine what kind of pattern is observed within a person's DNA. Now, no two people, with the exception of identical twins, are expected to be the same using this test. And what I am able to do is work with very minute samples, purify the samples, and obtain the DNA profile, which allows me to make comparisons to the DNA profiles I obtained from individuals who are involved in the case.
What you just described, is that also sometimes called genetic markers?
Yes.
And how are the frequencies of genetic markers determined?
The frequencies are determined by population statisticians who will sample a group of people within a population. And our databases have traits using these markers for Caucasians, African Americans, Hispanics from the state of Florida, and we also have one now for the Asian database.
And was this database validated for use in statistical interpretation of DNA results?
Yes, it has been validated and it has been published in peer-reviewed journals for the scientific and academic community.
Is the Broward Sheriff's Office lab accredited?
Yes, it is.
And with whom?
It is accredited by the American Society of Crime Lab Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board, which is now part of the ANAB, which is the ANSI National Accreditation Board.
What's the purpose of being accredited?
The purpose of accreditation, well, actually it's a requirement for crime laboratories DNA databases, crime laboratories doing DNA databasing work as well as forensic casework. In order for our laboratory to participate in the CODIS system, CODIS stands for the Combined DNA Index System. And it's also required in order to receive government grants or federal grants that we use to help operate and purchase consumables. But more importantly, the accreditation is done in order to give confidence to the agencies that we work for to ensure that we're doing quality work. We have a set of standards and guidelines that we must follow in order to make an interpretation and to release results. And it's these guidelines that I follow that are the basis for my testing.
And what is the American Board of Criminalistics?
The American Board of Criminalistics is a certification body that certifies individuals for expertise within the field. And there are certifications for forensic biology, firearms, latent fingerprints, and I believe trace evidence.
And what is the Scientific Working Group DNA Analysis Method?
That's we call it SWIGDAM, and the Scientific Working Group of DNA analysis methods is a peer group made up of experts within the field that create guidelines for the community to adopt as standards. And the standards are issued by the FBI in the FBI quality assurance document that our laboratory must follow in order to maintain accreditation.
Do you follow those requirements and
Yes.
standards?
Yes, we do, and we are audited to ensure compliance with those standards.
And can you tell us a little bit about the quality assurance program at the Sheriff's Office Lab?
The quality assurance program is a program that's designed to ensure the reliability and I guess trueness of our results. That if we were to make a determination and obtain a profile and the comparisons are made, that we're doing it in a reliable fashion that is free of contamination, free of sample mix-up, and is as error-free as we can make it.
Can you tell the jury what procedures and practices are in place to make sure that evidence isn't tampered with?
Our laboratory requires that the evidence be sealed in containers, and the evidence generally is individually sealed depending on where it's coming from in order to minimize cross-contamination. Cross-contamination is a situation where evidence from one item that's unrelated to another is allowed to physically touch or occupy the same space in which portion of the cells can transfer, where the DNA profile from one item can be observed in another, even though the same samples did not originate from one another. So the evidence technicians that collect the swabs that I test presumably have been trained in order to try to minimize this cross-contamination, and so the packaging is sealed with evidence tape. The evidence tape is brittle and will show evidence of tampering if someone was to try to remove it by either freezing it, by using a solvent to remove it. And so this tamper-evident tape is supposed to help protect the integrity of the packaging to ensure the chain of custody. The chain of custody is a written document that documents the transfer of the item as it goes through the process from collection to the time the evidence is received into my laboratory, the time that I examine it, the time I reseal it and send it back to the agency. So we have a documented tracking system as well as a handling procedure in order to accept, analyze, and return evidence.
Can you tell the jury what effects moisture has on the transfer of DNA from one item or person to another?
If something is wet, such as a fresh blood stain, or even, let's say a blood stain has been dried on a surface, those will, so long as the sample is wet, it easily transfers from one substrate to another. So for instance, if we have a dry substrate where dry blood is observed on an item, a technician may dampen a swab and then rub that swab along the surface in order to try to collect that stain. It's similar to what we would do if we see a stain on a counter in a kitchen. We would wet it with either water or a solvent to try to remove it. But in this case, in cases like this and others, we can also use it to try to collect evidence that's left at a scene.
With regards to DNA, what is it?
DNA is for all intents and purposes, is a chemical that's found in our cells. And it's surrounded by proteins and the cellular membrane in order to try to protect it. And if we could stretch it out in the linear fashion, it will be about the length of my arm. It's about 3 feet long. And what it is it's a microscopic molecule that we cannot see with the naked eye. And it's tightly coiled up and bound inside each cell in our body. And it's found in all of our cells. It's found in the cells of our mouth. It's found in the mucous membranes of our body linings. It's found in our blood, in the white blood cells. And it's found in almost every cell except for mature red blood cells. And the reason it's not found in mature red blood cells is because it doesn't contain a nucleus. The DNA is actually found in nuclei of all of our cells.
Now, in this case, I want to talk about specifically, where was the evidence before you received it?
It was held in the evidence vault. It's the custodians maintain the evidence until I receive it for testing.
And how do you go about getting it out of the vault?
I make a request. The case is usually assigned to me by my unit supervisor or a person standing in as a supervisor. And once I receive it, I then make a request of the vault to retrieve the evidence.
Is there a laboratory number that is assigned to each case?
Yes, a unique laboratory number is assigned to each item of evidence that comes into the laboratory, or actually to each case that comes into the laboratory, and then item numbers are subsequently added to each item to uniquely identify the evidence.
In the case that you're testifying here today, do you know what the unique lab number that was assigned was?
I have it as 14-07837.
So I'm now showing it's been previously admitted into evidence as States 20, States 21, States 10, and States 28. This big purple sticker on the back of each of those, what is that?
That is a label that's generated by my laboratory that has the BSO lab number, and that's 14-07837.
Okay, let's hold on to that for a minute. I'd like you to tell the jury from beginning to end the DNA analysis process.
The DNA analysis process begins with the examination of each of these items in a controlled environment. The controlled environment that I use is a biological hood. I wear a lab coat, I wear gloves, and I have my DNA profile on hand. So that way, if any of our technicians who collect the evidence or if I contaminate the evidence, that can be detected. So it's like a laboratory. It is a laboratory in effect. It's like a clinical setting where each of these items is opened individually. I do an assessment, a visual inspection of the packaging to make sure it's intact, that the seals are not breached, and the items that are contained within are protected. And I open each item separately, take a sampling of it to determine whether or not a biological fluid such as blood may be present. And if I believe blood may be present, I perform a simple chemical test to indicate so. And I'll then take a sampling for DNA, and the DNA process involves purifying the sample coming from the evidence to try to extract the DNA from it and discard the waste such as the cellular membrane and the protein and lipids. And once I purify the DNA, I then determine how much DNA is present and perform the PCR testing.
So let's go a little bit back. Do you perform serological testing on these samples?
It's a very basic serological test to determine whether or not blood may or may not be present.
Did you do that in this case?
I did for some of the items, yes.
Okay. And we'll go through each item individually. So let's start with the first step. When you said you're cleaning up the DNA sample, what does that refer to?
Technically, it's called DNA extraction.
So can you explain in a little bit more detail what is the extraction step of DNA?
Contained within these items are swabs. These are swabs that are similar to cotton tip swabs you would see in a doctor's office. They are used to collect the evidence from the items that were tested. I take a razor blade, the single edge, and I literally cut off a portion of that swab, place it in a 1.5 ml to 2 ml, which is a milliliter, tube. These are individual disposable sterile tubes. I extract the DNA by adding a chemical to it that will burst open the cell and elute or draw out the DNA into the solution. I then use a robotic platform to purify the DNA, which uses a magnetic bead chemistry in order to bind the DNA and discard the rest of the material which is not of interest. Once the DNA has been purified, it's then captured in a final tube that I then take to further analysis.
What is the next step in the analysis?
The next step in the analysis is a quantification step to determine how much human-specific DNA is present in the sample. And I use a DNA test called quantifiler trio, and that test is used to determine the amount of human and male DNA that's present in the sample.
You said in the sample, are there different types of samples that you receive?
We receive samples from all types of evidence. We receive evidence in forms of sexual assault kits where it may contain, unrelated to this case, but I am trained to examine whether or not semen may be present, and that's where the male and female marker comes into play with that
What is the
quantification
difference
test.
between a standard and evidence from your perspective?
A standard is used as a reference. It's what I compare the evidence results to, and that's how I make the determination as to whether or not someone can or cannot be the source of the DNA.
And with regards to the order of testing, which do you do first?
We always try to start with the forensic evidence first, which is the items from the crime scene. And the reason I say that we always try is because sometimes we will get additional evidence down the road after the knowns have been examined. But we always try to separate the samples by either space or time.
And in this case, did you do that?
Yes, I did.
Can you please tell the jury what you tested first?
In this case, I tested swabs from what is described as a broken beer bottle spout. I tested swabs from a baseball cap rim and a baseball cap brim, B-R-I-M. I also tested swabs from what is described as a $20 bill.
So with regards to the testing, let's start with the broken beer bottle that's swab. And that you assigned a specific number or identifier to that item?
It was identified as item G8, which was given by the submitting agency.
Do you maintain those same numbers or items throughout?
I generally try to in order to try to minimize confusion.
Okay. Did you do STR analysis in this case?
Yes, I did.
What is STR analysis?
As I mentioned before, DNA is a very, very tiny molecule that can't be seen with the naked eye. So I use a technique known as short tandem repeats, and that is a PCR-based method. PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction, which attaches a label or a tag that can be detected by an instrument known as a genetic analyzer. DNA has this interesting property where it can migrate in an electrical field. It has a negative charge, and when it is placed in this instrument, a negative charge is applied to it and it migrates. And we can separate the DNA fragments based on their size down to better than half a base pair. And so with the precision of this instrument and with these tags that have been added through this,
Do a step called amplification.
yes, the PCR does involve amplification, and this process goes through 28 cycles of PCR. With each step, the DNA is being copied and the labels are being added in order for me to detect the DNA fragments.
Is DNA analysis something new?
No, it's been around for decades.
Do you know about a little bit of the brief history of it?
As it applies to forensics, yes.
Please.
The test that I use actually comes from the Baylor College of Medicine, and it was designed originally for paternity testing, but it has been adapted and adopted by the forensics field for the purposes of DNA testing as part of the 1994 DNA Identification Act passed by Congress. The DNA Identification Act allows for the collection of evidence from crime scenes as well as individuals in order to do comparisons. Well, I've been in the field long enough that I've done a testing method known as RFLP. I've done PCR using DQ alpha polymarker, and I've done earlier iterations of this STR testing using Profiler and Cofiler, which are commercially available kits that tested various markers. The latest adaptation of this is this kit called Identifiler, which was used in this case. Actually, technically, it's the Identifiler Plus kit. And we also have a newer kit known as Global Filer, which analyzes actually 22 markers. But for the last really 18 years, our field has been using this STR kit in various forms.
And so, to give the jury a little bit of background, where does a person's DNA come from?
We get it from mom and dad. We get our DNA from mom and half from dad. And humans are diploid. We have 2 copies of it. And so we inherit it, and our parents inherit it from their parents, and so on.
Can DNA change into another person's?
Not under normal biological methods. The only way a DNA can possibly change is through a bone marrow transplant or other types of really specialized medical practice. But in general, no. One person's DNA will not miraculously mutate into someone else's.
Is the person's DNA the same in all parts of their body?
Yes. Generally speaking, with very, very rare exception, DNA is going to be the same throughout a person's tissue, whether the sample is coming from their blood, from their bone, from their tooth enamel, it's all going to be the same.
You say with very rare exceptions. Have you ever seen a case of, is it chimerism?
It's chimerism, also cancers. Some cancers can cause mutations within that specific tumor or that tissue. But generally, really the only way I've known anyone's DNA to actually been really altered is through bone marrow transplant.
Okay. In this case, the different samples that were you given, did you take them through the 4 phases, the amplification, extraction of the DNA analysis?
Just to be technical, yes, extraction, quantitation, PCR, and then detection.
Okay. And if you explain to the jury what detection is yet, please?
The detection is the use of the genetic analyzer, and again, this is just an instrument that I use in order to develop the DNA profile, and I use a piece of software to help with the assistance of that profile.
Okay, I'm going to start. Do you create a chart of your results?
They
or a
are
table?
the DNA results are summarized on a table, yes.
Okay. And this is, so we can go through this. So is this the table that you created? You need to step down to see it.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is a summary of the DNA results that I obtained from some of the evidence in this case.
Okay, did you develop a profile from the beer bottle?
Yes, I did.
Okay, let's go through this. On the left, you have all these items and locus numbers. What are those?
Without getting too technical, this is the address. The D stands for DNA, the 8 stands for chromosome 8, S means it's a single copy, and it's found in a location that's universally recognized as 1179. Now, DNA is organized on 23 chromosomes in our body. So this happens to be a location on chromosome 8. The next one is a location on chromosome 21. This, for instance, is chromosome 7. And so the DNA addresses are going to be found in everyone's body. But what the marker that occupies that space tends to be different from person to person. Well, I mentioned earlier that we have short tandem repeats. We have this 4 base pair marker that repeats multiple times. At this particular location, this person happens to have a copy that repeats 15 times, hence the number 15, and 16, hence the number 16. So this is how many repeats exist of this at this location.
And so, Mr. Comarn, the 15 and 16, where do those numbers come from and from each individual?
They're inherited. And the reason we have 2 numbers at each location is because, again, humans are diploid. We have 2 copies of DNA, one from mom and one from dad.
So in this case, the individual got a 15 from mom or dad and a 16 from the other parent, mom or dad.
Precisely.
Do you know which one came from which?
No.
Is there any specific order that the numbers are written in?
It's just written as a smaller number or larger number, depending on how you look at it. So it's sequential, just to help make more sense of it as a person reading it.
Okay.
And just to clarify, when we're talking about a DNA result, it's read from top to bottom.
That's
So
here is for Mr. Knight, and that was item G5.
yes. And we can see that although there is a similarity, he's excluded because of the observation of a different allele 16 was detected at that location, and he has an 8. And so looking at multiple locations, I concluded that there were differences that would not permit him as being a possible contributor.
And now these listed addresses, are they assigned to eye color, skin color, anything of that nature?
No, they're not. And as far as we know, they don't have any selective pressure, meaning they're not linked to any mutations or anything that we can physically see. And so as a result, these areas are prone to mutations, but these mutations, as far as we know, don't cause us any harm.
Did you also look at, you mentioned those $20 bills as well. Did you compare those in this case?
Yes, I compared the DNA results, and I determined that the item G11 and G12 appeared to have a DNA profile originating from one person, and I concluded that Mr. Knight was consistent as being a possible contributor, and Mr. Elder and the other subject was Mr. Baptista were excluded.
So, did you also test an item that was submitted that was labeled stain, swab from stain number 5?
Yes, I did.
And did you do the same process, the same allele chart for that one?
I did, but this time I used the newer kit that has 22 markers instead of 15.
Let me, on that note, let's talk about timing on this. And what was the first date you were assigned the casework in this 147837 lab number?
This was approximately either April or May of, I believe it was May of 2014.
And is that when you did the beer bottle, the hat rim, and then the standards that were given to you?
Of 2014, with the exception of the bloodstain card from Mr. Knight, which was analyzed in May of 2014.
Was the standard from Mr. Elder ever on the table at the same time that the standard the evidence of G8, the swab was?
No.
Why not?
I didn't receive the standard from Mr. Elder or Mr. Baptista until after the analysis was completed on the forensic items.
Okay. Now, did you do some more recent analysis in this case in October of this year?
Yes.
Okay, going on to the swab from labeled stain number 5 at front passenger door. Did you test that sample?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to deduce a DNA profile from that?
A DNA profile was detected, and it indicated that it was coming from one person.
And who was that?
I concluded, based on comparisons to Mr. Elder, Mr. Baptista, and Mr. Knight, that the DNA results were consistent with Mr. Baptista. The remaining 2 individuals are excluded.
And so did you also test DNA from swab stain number 7, passenger front windshield?
Yes, I did.
And who did you conclude that DNA came from?
The DNA profile was consistent with Mr. Knight, and the other 2 individuals were excluded.
So, as a result of the testing in this case, you produced the DNA profiles. What statistical method did you use to interpret those results?
Whenever I make a positive association between the evidence and a person, I do a statistical calculation, and this is required as part of the recommendations from the scientific working group. And the reason we do this is because I don't actually analyze the entire DNA molecule. I'm only analyzing a portion of it. So technically there is a statistical chance that 2 unrelated people could have the same markers. So if it's possible, based on the possibility that it could be a coincidental match, where 2 people happen to have the same profile, I go in and I'll do a calculation to see, well, if that is hypothesized, I want to see how rare or how common this DNA profile is. So I mentioned earlier that I used the FBI database back in 2014. I used the population frequency database from the FBI using a calculation known as the product rule, or the random match probability, to determine how often we could expect to see the DNA from the beer bottle, the DNA from the major profile from the hat, and the DNA from the $20 bill. And I drew a conclusion based on the rarity of these profiles that the chances were so rare that it's unlikely to be seen in anyone other than an identical twin or this person. And so I concluded that these people were the sources of the DNA once I made the match. And in this case, for the samples from the door and the windshield, I concluded that the samples were so rare that they were rarer than 1 in 400 billion. And the first numbers were rarer than 1 in 30 billion.
And that's a big number. How many zeros are we talking?
400 billion, you would have better chances of winning the Powerball probably several times over than matching the evidence in this case.
With regards to the population of the world, what are we at currently?
Currently, I believe we're a little over 7 billion in the world, and we have a little over 300 million within the U.S. population. So in my first report, the remarks state that the odds were rarer than 1 in 30 billion. That was 100 times rarer than the U.S. population estimates at that time. And now we've moved on to 1 in 400 billion, which is roughly several orders of magnitude greater than the Earth's population.
Now, does that also take into account the fact that roughly half of the world is male and half of the world is female?
So population statistics, oddly enough, do not, the gender doesn't come into play. And the reason that happens is because half of our DNA is from mom and half is from dad.
Okay. And so just so we're clear, you did say the term exclusion. What does that mean?
Exclusion means that person cannot be the source of the DNA profile that I obtained. It doesn't mean they didn't come into contact with it. It just simply means that I'm not able, the DNA results do not indicate that person is the source of the result.
With regards to DNA, does it have any ability to move on its own? Does it have locomotion, I guess, the molecule itself?
Only in a liquid sample such as blood or a sample that contains the fluid. But no, it doesn't. The cells in our body are not like amoeba. They don't swim. They're just static. And no, as far as I know, no.
Nothing further at this time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I have to run back, I just have something I have to sign. So we'll just take a couple minutes, we'll be right back. Go back in there, of course, I'll talk about the case. Ms. Comer, of course, if you'd like to step down and take a comfort break. Okay, please be seated. Defense, whenever you're ready.
Here.
Hi, how are you? I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Did I understand you correctly when you said that the BSO crime lab is actually on the first floor of this building, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And the DNA lab is just one section of the BSO crime lab, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. And there are multiple other sections of the BSO crime lab?
Yes, we have the firearms unit, we have the crime scene unit down the hall, and we have a latent print unit and a chemistry unit.
Okay, so you have a whole separate unit for fingerprints.
Yes, we do.
And there are people who sit there all day long, like you said in the DNA lab, whose sole job is to analyze fingerprints, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So if the Miramar Police Department wanted a fingerprint analyzed, they could have given it to the fingerprint lab, correct?
I don't work in that unit, but presumably if they have a request, they can make it the request of our agency, yes.
Okay. But your expertise is in DNA?
Yes.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about the timing of the test. When did you receive the swabs from the baseball cap?
I started my testing in May 21st of 2014, but they came into the laboratory shortly before that.
In May of 2014?
Yeah, May 21st of 2014 is when I started my examination of that evidence.
Okay. And you received the swabs from the $20 bill and from the bottle at the same time that you received the swabs from the baseball cap, correct?
I believe they were packaged in the same envelope.
They were packaged together?
Yes, but they were individual boxes, so they're separated.
Okay. And you said that was May of 2014, correct?
Yes.
When did you receive the swabs from the exterior of the car?
The exterior of the car was a more recent submission. and they came in October of this year, 2018.
Okay. And you tested those swabs immediately after?
I did,
Okay.
because of this event.
Okay. So am I correct that the swabs from the exterior of the car weren't tested until 2 weeks ago, which is 4.5 years after this incident, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Did you test any swabs labeled interior of the vehicle?
No, I did not.
Did you test any swabs labeled interior front passenger seat of the vehicle?
I did not receive an item described as that.
Okay. Did you test any swabs labeled interior center console of the vehicle?
I did not, no.
Did you test any swabs labeled interior door frame of the vehicle?
No, I did not.
Did the state ask you to test any other samples in this case?
They did.
Did you test those?
No. The reason is we have a submission policy that's dictated by my unit supervisor, and a determination was made with our agency to limit the number of samples that could be submitted for testing.
Okay. You testified on direct that the major contributor to the hat, or to the baseball cap interior rim, is Armando Baptista, correct?
I did not conclude that it is him, if the DNA is consistent with him, and technically the odds being so rare, I concluded that he is the source, absent of identical twin. But yes, there is a major profile that was consistent with him.
So he's the major contributor to that portion, because I know you found a minor and a major.
There was at least one minor contributor, and the reason I say at least, because there is a possibility that the DNA from the minor component could be coming from more than one person.
Okay. And so the major contributor on the exterior brim of the hat was also Armando Baptista, correct?
There was a swab described as int and ext.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's interior and exterior or just the exterior. But that specifically is item G10.
Okay, so the EXT brim was Armando Baptista.
There was a major profile consistent with Mr. Baptista.
So when you have a major contributor and a minor contributor, the major contributor's DNA is more likely the most DNA that's on the item that you're testing, correct?
Generally speaking, yes.
You also testified on direct that you took a swab from stain number 5, which is the front passenger door, and that was also consistent with your sample of DNA from Armando Baptista, correct? Stain number 5.
Yes, this is item number 4 in my report, otherwise known as G60, which is stain number 5, front passenger door exterior.
Okay, I just want to make sure, I know that it's confusing, but it's labeled a little bit different.
I got a little tripped up because item number 5 in my report is actually referring to item number 7. We have a cross-check of numbers here. We have numbers coming from the crime scene compared to numbers coming from the submitting agency compared to numbers that are assigned by my laboratory information management system, and that's why I hesitated.
Okay,
but yes,
so I will make it easier for you.
Stain number 5 from the front passenger door exterior was consistent with Mr. Baptista.
Okay, thank you. But that sample is actually negative for blood, correct?
I did not detect blood on that side, on that evidence.
Okay. Can you define what touch DNA is for me?
Touch DNA is DNA that originates from coming into contact with someone's hands or person. Whenever we are talking, for instance, wherever I'm talking, there's a possibility that I could be aerosoling DNA onto this paper. If we were to swab it, it's possible that a person may be able to detect my DNA either from me talking over it or from my hands physically touching it. So touch DNA refers to items such as handling of a weapon, such as a knife or baseball bat or tool, that we actually can excrete DNA in our perspiration in the cells, and that can transfer onto an item that we're touching, and that hence the term touch DNA.
Okay. So the findings of DNA on the outside of the vehicle, and that is the swab from stain number 5, the front passenger door exterior, which is G60 in your report. That is consistent with Mr. Baptista having touched the vehicle with his hands at some point.
I don't know what the nature of the sample is. All I can tell you is I did a chemical test to determine whether or not blood was present, and I didn't detect it. It's not to say it couldn't be coming from blood. All I can tell you is there's a biological stain that's coming from that sample that's consistent with Mr. Baptista. It could be from blood that's too low to detect. It could be from his hands touching it. It could be from saliva. It could be from perspiration. I don't know the origin of it.
Okay, but you don't know when that DNA was transferred to that location, correct?
I do not know.
And
Presumably it was recent because usually environmental conditions can break down the stain, sunlight can break it down. So presumably it was sometime within hours of the incident. I would not expect it to be, because it's located in the exterior of a car, to be there for too long.
okay, but there's no way to date when that DNA is.
Technically,
when that
no.
DNA was left.
I could not precisely measure the length of time it was placed on the vehicle.
You also testified on direct that the swab from the broken beer bottle spout was a match to Demetrius Elder, correct?
Yes.
And again, you have no way of knowing when that DNA was transferred there.
No, I do not.
Okay, it could have been there moments before, correct?
Depending on how it's stored, it could be there for years. And what I mean by that is if DNA is stored in a dry condition, away from moisture, away from sunlight, such as in a brown paper bag, such as the packaging we see earlier today, it technically could stay there for years.
So that DNA could have been there from years before.
Potentially, depending on how it's stored. It can be anywhere from a few hours to days to years. It all depends on the condition of how that sample is stored.
Okay. You also have no way of knowing how Mr. Elder's DNA was transferred to that bottle, correct?
I do not know.
Other than the swab from the spout of the bottle, did you receive any other swabs from the bottle?
No. All I received was a swab identified as coming from the broken beer bottle spout.
Okay, and you didn't receive any swabs from the body of the bottle itself?
I'm not aware of any were collected, to be honest.
And you didn't receive any swabs from a sticker that was attached to the body of the bottle?
No, I did not.
What is the difference between saliva and touch DNA?
Saliva would be DNA originating from the cells of a person's mouth. It could also be from a person licking a beer bottle, touching it with their lips, and that saliva could transfer to the container. So I'm holding a styrofoam cup in my hand. It's possible that if a technician comes in and swabs the rim of this cup, they potentially could get either the saliva or cells from my mouth on the rim of this cup.
So when you're taking DNA from a person, it's more common to swab the inside of their mouth and their hands because there's more DNA in saliva.
There's more DNA in the fresh cells coming from the mouth. DNA in our mucous membranes are constantly being generated there because the cells are fresher. The DNA on the surface of our skin, oddly enough, doesn't readily yield DNA that easily. And the reason is the cells are dead. They're in a condition in which they start to degrade. And I've tested skin samples that are from people who are in a state of peeling from sunburns. And I could not get a DNA profile out of their skin cells. And so the reason we collect known standards from blood and from cheek cells is because these are living cells and they're readily fresh.
So I've been holding on to this pen for my questions for you. Just by looking at this pen, would you ever be able to tell whether or not my DNA was on it?
Not by observation with the naked eye, no.
Okay, but there's a chance that my DNA isn't on this pen.
There's a chance it may not be, yes.
Okay. And you brought it up earlier about taking a sip out of your cup. The DNA that's on the spout of the bottle, that's consistent with someone having drank out of that bottle, correct?
That's a possibility. It could also be possible the person, depending on how they're holding the bottle, if they're holding it on the neck, the cells could have transferred from the person's hand to that bottle, or it could be from the person's mouth. I really can't tell.
Okay.
My testing does not indicate what the source is.
Okay, but you couldn't tell when that person drank out of the bottle, correct?
I cannot either, no. I cannot tell how long a sample persists on an item.
Okay. Did you receive any swabs labeled the bottom of the beer bottle from the interior of the car?
No, I did not.
Did you receive and test any swabs labeled paper bags that were on the decedent's hands?
No, I did not.
Did you receive any swabs labeled DNA from the decedent's fingers?
No, I did not.
Did you receive any swabs of DNA from the fingernail scrapings that were collected from underneath the decedent's fingers?
I did not.
And did you receive any swabs from a red Solo cup?
No, I did not.
Okay, so you didn't receive any of those and you didn't test any of those, correct?
I'm not aware of these additional items that you mentioned, so no, I did not test them.
Okay, give me 1 second, please. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick.
Okay, just to clarify a question on the swab from stain number 7, did you do presumptive testing on that?
Yes, there was a presumptive chemical test for blood that was performed, and it was positive, indicating that blood may be present.
And are you able to give me a yes or no as to whether or not blood was present based on the rest of your DNA testing?
I can just tell you there's a DNA profile obtained from that, and presumably it's coming from blood.
So you say presumably. Can you say definitively it is or is not from blood?
I cannot definitively say it's from human blood.
And is that the same with regards to the swab from stain number 5?
Yes, there's a biological stain there, but I cannot conclude whether or not it's coming from blood or another biological source.
And do you know the cost for DNA testing?
Roughly, yes.
And how much is that?
It's not something I generally concern myself with. That's something for my boss and my boss's boss to concern themselves with. But the testing is roughly about $100 a sample.
And with regards to the limit that you for testing, what is that limit that's established by the Sheriff's Office?
I'm not aware of it because, again, I stay in my lane, so to speak, and I follow with really the assignments that I'm given. There is a limit, however, to the number of samples that are laboratory tests, and that is negotiated between my boss and my lab director and the submitting agency.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Your excuse.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, if you would call your next witness, please.
Hector Bertrand.
You swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may be seated. Please say your first name and last name for the record.
Hector Bertrand,
Say your last name.
B as in boy, E-R-T-R-A-N-D.
Thank you.
State whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Detective. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. What do you do for a living?
I'm work for the Miramar Police Department
How long have you worked for the Miramar Police Department?
since October of 1992.
What different hats have you worn for the Miramar Police Department?
I started in road patrol, then I got transferred to Detective Bureau. I worked sex crimes for a couple of years, then I went to narcotics, worked undercover narcotics for 10, and the last 12 years I've been in homicide.
What training do you have in the area of homicide investigations?
A lot of on-the-job experience. I've been in the Bureau for 24 years. I've also attended several narcotics classes, courses throughout my career.
On April 25th of 2014, did you have an occasion to become involved in the investigation into the death of Fakhruddin Mohammed Knight?
Yes, I did.
How did you get involved?
I was called by Detective Zeller. Detective Zeller was on call. We have rotation call-outs, and it was his rotation, but within that we also have a rotation on homicides. So even though it may be his call out, but if I was next up on homicide, then I would take the case, and that's what happened in this case.
So in this case, approximately what time did you get to the scene? And if you need to refresh your recollection, just let us know you're doing so.
Yes, ma'am. I got called out at 22:30 and got to the scene about half an hour later.
Can you translate that into normal?
That's
time?
at 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m.
Okay, at 11 p.m., walk me through the first thing you did when you get on scene.
Well, when I got to the scene, he briefed me a little bit on what he had so far. I kind of walked the scene.
Let me stop you right there. You said you walked the scene. What area of the scene did you go to first?
Well, the road was blocked. I'm not sure where exactly I parked. I think I parked somewhere on Miramar Parkway, but the whole road was blocked from Terra Road, Miramar Parkway, north to, I believe, Claridge.
Okay, if I may. We have a map here. Give me an idea of what's Miramar Parkway on this map?
This is Miramar Parkway. It goes east and west, and then Terra Road goes north and south. Well, just
Okay, and with regards to the first part of the scene you went to, can you show us where?
right around here.
So that's the intersection of Terra Road and Miramar Parkway.
Parkway. And then eventually I walked northbound.
So starting when you're right here at Miramar Parkway and Terra Road, what are some of the items that you saw lying on the ground?
I remember seeing the broken top of a bottle. It appeared to be a beer bottle. It was glass, and it was just a spout area that was there, and I believe some little pieces of glass. There was also, I believe there was a $20 bill that had blood on it, and there was a baseball cap, Boston Red Sox baseball cap.
We've already seen some of these photos before, but just so that we're making sure we're talking about the same scene here.
Just to clarify, the baseball cap, I didn't know it was Boston till later.
Till later.
I knew it was a baseball cap.
Did you touch anything on scene?
No.
Why not?
That's for the evidence technician who's going to collect the evidence to collect and
And I'm going to
Yeah,
show
items.
you, this is picture 38. Is this the scene?
yes, ma'am.
So did you put up the crime scene tape?
No.
Who put that up?
The responding officers, but that was done before I got there.
Okay. So you do not know exactly who did it?
No, ma'am.
In terms of the collection of evidence, what is your responsibilities in that? On scene.
Really, I kind of, it's the responsibility of collecting everything that's with the crime scene personnel. Initially, if I'm able to, since this was an open area, I kind of walk the scene. If it's enclosed, like let's say in a house or something like that, I usually don't go into the scene at all until after crime scene has done their thing, because you don't want to disturb anything or touch anything or remove anything inadvertently from the scene. So in this case, I just walked the scene, didn't touch anything, made some mental notes, wrote some notes, referenced what I saw, my observations, and then, like I said, I continued north on Terra Road, and then there was on the west side of the road, there was some clothing, some bloody towels, and I think there was also some like EMS type items, gloves or scissors or something like that.
Okay. With regards to the witnesses on scene, who did you make contact with that night?
There were 3 people that I spoke to. One was McMath.
With the individual, did you meet someone named Wendy Gimbolas?
I spoke to Wendy also, who is the decedent's girlfriend.
Did either of those 2 individuals tell you the name Armando Baptista or Demetrius Elder?
No.
Did you have any suspects or leads at that point for the identity of the individuals who committed this crime?
No.
So after you leave this scene, do you do anything else the evening of April 25th to the early morning of April 26th?
After we left the scene, we went back to the police department, myself and a couple detectives, and I remember we ran some partial tags, possible that suspect vehicle, but that met with negative results.
And in terms of the tag that you had, do you remember the 3 letters that you had been given?
I'm going to refresh my memory by looking at my report, but let's see. YNE.
What other descriptions of the vehicle did you have at that point? Let's start with the...
As a beige vehicle, maybe a 2-door. I think it was initially like a Honda or Toyota. There was also some description that she gave reference whether there was like a center console or something. I think she said there wasn't a center console in the car.
Is there anything about the brake lights?
There was some, I think she said something about round brake lights.
And in terms of the 2 suspects, did Ms. Gimbolas give you physical descriptions on them?
Yes, she did.
After that searching of the databases that evening, are we now in the next morning of April 26th of 2014? What did you do then?
Later that morning, I went to the autopsy, attended the autopsy.
And at the autopsy, were you present for the entire thing?
Yes, I was.
Were fingerprints taken of the deceased?
Yes,
Were scrapings done under the deceased nails?
yes.
Was the objects that were still on the deceased preserved? Rings, things of that nature?
Believe the clothing had been removed. There was some clothing at the scene. I believe there was some camel type shorts or pants, white t-shirt, some sneakers. So those items were at the scene and were collected at the scene.
And who else was present at the autopsy?
Would have been hospital person, I mean not hospital, people from the medical examiner's office, and I don't recall offhand if, let me see if I have it on my report. Possibly one of our crime scenes techs might have been there, but I don't recall right now.
Later on during the day on April 26th of 2014, did you respond back to the incident location?
Yes, I did.
What was the purpose of that?
Well, it was nighttime when we went there. Lighting wasn't that good. It was dark. And it's common that we'll come back especially on an outdoor scene. Even inside houses, we'll come back just to give it a once-over, see if we missed something, and that's what we did.
Were you specifically looking for a piece of evidence or an item that you had been informed of?
Objection, call for hearsay.
Sustained.
What was the reason for going back to the scene?
Objection, call for hearsay.
I don't know that. Let's go sidebar. The objection's over, we'll go ahead.
So Detective Bertrand, why did you go back on the 26th to the scene?
Again, we were just wanted to do a once-over of the scene, see if we missed anything.
Did you look for tags?
We were looking for tags. We were also looking, we walked east, because the information we had was that the vehicle fled east. So we walked eastbound on that would be on the east.
Let's use the map because you're getting me turned around already. So, come in here. Back on the scene on the 26th, the next day during daylight. Where do you go?
We basically, we walked this area over here on Terra Road. We walked this area here on Terra Road, okay? We also walked along here, almost to University,
Hold on, I have another map that would show that area.
which is just a little bit further down.
We have Claridge Drive there, so you walked from there until what?
We walked almost up to here to University, and then we walked back, just on the off chance that when they were fleeing, they threw the knife out the window or something like that. Maybe we get lucky. So we walked that way, and then we came back, and we walked,
Let me
started
switch back to the other one, go a little bit closer. Did you get lucky? Did you find any murder weapon on the side of the road?
Nope.
Okay. So then you're coming back westbound?
We came
on
back
the-
west, I think we just came back down this way, and then we walked around here, kind of meandered around this area here, and kind of like over here, I believe it was like either right here, it was right around here is where we found a small solo cup. And to me, it was kind of unusual, the solo cup, because I'm used to, I normally buy the 16-ounce, the big solo cup, and this was like a small solo cup, so.
And just so the record's clear, you're pointing to the house here due south of 8516 Claridge that is
Yes.
on Miramar Parkway facing south.
Yes, ma'am.
And you pointed just to the side of the driveway there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Detective Bertrand, I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as States E for identification purposes only. Do you recognize that?
That's my handwriting, and that's the property receipt.
And what is that?
It's going to be of the red solo cup that we put in evidence.
And is that in the same or substantially the same condition as it was when you took it into evidence on April 26th of 2014?
Yes, this is this evidence tape. These are my initial, my ID, and the date. and the time it was placed into evidence, and this is my handwriting.
Here at this time, the state would request to move states EE in as states 31.
Objection.
Why don't we all take a 2-second stretch break? Everybody's yawning back there. Just stand up and stretch for a minute while they get that mark.
Your Honor, can I get some water, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Got it.
Of course.
And remember, anytime you want to stand up, just feel free to stand up, okay? You see me getting up every once in a while. Okay, is it marked? All right.
Yes. Hector Bertrand, I'm going to give you a pair of gloves, and I'll ask you to open that, please.
Thank you.
You're
You got
welcome.
extra large. You want me to open it?
Please.
I'm going to open it from the bottom.
Whichever's easier. And if you could put it up here so we can show. Come back down. And so this is the small red solo cup that you found on April 26th.
Yes.
And for scale purposes, when you talk about a regular solo cup, are you talking more like this size?
Yes, ma'am.
So can you hold that up for the jury so they can see the difference? You just hold it up next to this one if you want, that one. So Detective Bertrand, did you submit that for testing?
We collected it, but I don't think it, not sure what the crime scene texted with it.
Did you request for it to be tested personally?
I did.
Okay. And with regards, that would have been done through your crime scene unit?
I'm sorry?
That would have been done through your crime scene unit?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to go forward onto April 28th of 2014. Did you go to a business identified as Inktel?
Yes.
What did you do when you got there?
What day was the
April 28th of 2014.
reason we went there is we had obtained information that one of the suspects possibly worked there. And so we had a partial tag, and we drove through the parking lot. We found a car that kind of, sort of, it had the same color, it had the similar tag number, at least the first couple letters. We sat on it for a while. We eventually learned that it had nothing to do with the case. It was just a coincidence, and we did follow, I think, the part of North Miami Beach, and I think like a grocery store also, and that was about it. And
Okay. With regards, then later on that day, did you have a photo lineup done, including the suspect Demetrius Elmer?
yes,
And who viewed that photo lineup?
Well, Detective, I asked Detective Toyota to do the lineup, and it was shown to Wendy.
And did Wendy make an identification at that point?
She did.
Objection to hearsay.
Sustained, go ahead and,
She did.
Okay, moving on to April 29th of 2014. Did you obtain the 911 call from dispatch at that point?
I did.
And did you have an additional photo lineup created with Detective Toyota?
Yes.
I'm now showing you what's been previously entered into evidence as states 22.
Yes, ma'am.
So the person that was identified in that lineup in photo 5, who is that?
Armando Baptista.
counsel.
Hello, Judge. Don't worry. Thank you. On May 2nd of 2014, did you respond back to Inktel?
We did.
Did you conduct additional surveillance there?
We did. It was very brief because Detective Toyota called me and he had additional information and he sent me to a location in Miami Gardens and I responded to that location.
So I want to draw your attention to 6916 Northwest 186th Street in Miami Gardens, Florida. Did you go there?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember about what time you got there?
Not exactly. I know it was morning because we started at 8 a.m. Surveillance at Intel, and so it was still morning, as best as I recall.
Okay. I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as States double F for identification purposes only. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
What does that show?
That's the actually the street up here is Miami Gardens. So this is northbound, and then over here is the complex where Elder's girlfriend lived, and Elder lived there.
Did you respond to that location?
I did.
Does that map fairly and accurately represent the complex as it was on May 2nd of 2014?
Yes, ma'am.
Here at this time, the state would request to move states FF in as states 32.
No objection.
Detective Bertrand. So now that we have this up where everybody can see it a little bit easier. Down at the bottom here, you have a note that
Can I get up?
indicates-
Yeah, why don't you get up and get down, it'd be easier.
Thank you, Ellen.
So we're clear. The entrance, is that what we're looking at here?
Yes.
There we go, that's a little better. Okay, And so can you show on this map where Mr. Elder's apartment was at this time?
This is I can show you the building, I never went to the actual apartment, but this is the building right here.
And where was the car found?
The vehicle was found over here. It was facing, I have the arrow like that, but it was actually facing this way, so it was facing eastbound, parked right along this. There's a fence line here, which is the perimeter of the complex.
And was there any repaving or resurfacing going on in the complex when you were there?
No, I actually, just so you know how, when I came in, I actually drove first to the actual apartment or building where he lives. And I started driving around looking for the car. At this point we knew it was a beige Impala. We had the year, we also had the serial number of the car. So I kind of drove all around here. I did find some cars matching the description, but when I got out and tried to look at the serial number, they were not the car. There was also some other Impalas I remember looking, even though they weren't beige, but I still got off and looked at them. So I actually drove the entire complex looking for the car, and eventually I ended up over here. At least when I was there was no workers, there was no trucks that would indicate that they were resurfacing or doing anything in the complex or any indication of anything. And there was cars parked all over the place.
And so when you saw this beige Impala parked over here, how did you know this was your car that you were looking for?
As soon as I saw the car and I started walking up to it, I could see what I believe to be blood. I could see drops and smears and things like that of blood on the car on the passenger side of the vehicle.
When you made that discovery, what did you do next?
Initially I took some pictures. I called Detective Toyota. I sent them pictures of the serial number that I took, and he confirmed that it was in fact Ashley Farrell's vehicle, which is Elder's
So let me pause you
girlfriend.
right there. Did you have crime scene come out and take photos of the vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as State's Composite GG of 60 photographs. Have you had a chance to review these before you came into court today?
Yes, ma'am.
Do they fairly and accurately represent how that vehicle looked at 6960 Miami Gardens Drive in Miami Lakes, Florida on May 2nd of 2014?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would request to move State's GG in as State 33 and request permission to publish.
No objection.
Thank you. And while the clerk is marking that, I'll have you look through State's Composite HH for identification purposes. Thank you. Have you had a chance to review those pictures before coming into court today?
Yes, ma'am.
Do they fairly and accurately represent the vehicle as you found it on May 3rd of 2014?
Yes, ma'am.
Here, and then there are, if you just go to the last page, sorry, I can give the number. There are 154 photos there. Here, and at this time, the state would request to move in State's HH as 34.
No objection.
Okay. And we'll publish those in just a moment. So going back to State's 33, the pictures of the Impala. Was there any covering, garage, anything that protected this vehicle from the elements when you got there?
No.
Is this how it looked? If you want to step down so you can see the pictures as we're talking about it. Here, when you got there.
Yes, ma'am. This would be east, this would be north.
Here. Photograph 2. Photograph 3.
The fence line that I was talking about, perimeter around it.
Speak up so the fence council can hear you too.
The perimeter, that's the fence. Perimeter fence.
Photograph 4.
And the vehicle pointing east, that's the back.
And this tag is nowhere close to the YNE or YNE that you had earlier.
Actually, that tag doesn't even belong to the vehicle. It's assigned to Ashley Farrell, but I believe she bought a Kia or something. It was to a different vehicle. It
It did not belong to that one. Continuing on, this is photo 6, photo 7, and then this vehicle here in the back, what is that?
The crime scene van.
Photo 8. Photo 9. Did you observe these stains on the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Photo 10. Photo 11. Twelve. 13. 14 here, zoom in a little bit.
This is also blood.
And the name of the complex that you were in, is it Villa Bellini? If you don't recall, please don't guess.
I don't remember.
Okay. Is this your normal jurisdiction?
No.
Like 16. So 17 here. This visitor pass, it's upside down in this photo. Coral Gate East Condominium Visitor Pass.
I believe that is the community.
And this was dated April of 2014.
Yes, ma'am. These are all photos from the outside of the vehicle. At this point, we hadn't gone inside the vehicle, so whatever we can take up from the outside in, outside the vehicle, these are all just outside view.
So 18, a close-up of that same visitor pass. And is that A Farrow, is that consistent with Ashley Farrow?
Yes, ma'am.
19, 20, 21 in here. And this is the suspect blood you had noticed. 22, 23, 24.
There's smears here, on the side, here, there, on the door.
20th photo 26, 27, 28, 29, and we can go a little bit on these. Did your crime scene come out and swab these on scene here in Dade County? Or did you wait until you were back in Miramar to do so? And if you don't recall, please tell me.
I wasn't there the entire time. At some point, we left. I'm not sure if she took the swabs there or waited until we got back because after, we ended up getting 2 search warrants for the vehicle. One, to remove the vehicle from Dade County and take it to Broward County, and that was done with Miami-Dade Police Department. And then there was a second warrant that was done, I believe, the following day to process the vehicle in Miramar.
And so just so we're a little bit clear on that, as a detective for the Miramar Police Department, do you have jurisdiction in Dade County?
No, ma'am.
When I say jurisdiction, are you able to act as a police officer in Dade County?
Under certain circumstances, yes, but not under this circumstance.
And under certain circumstances, you mean exigent circumstances?
Exigent circumstances, yes, ma'am.
This was not exigent circumstances?
No.
Photo number 30. This is still showing the passenger side of the Impala. 31. I'm going to skip through these quickly. 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. So they're blood stains, but dirt that was on the vehicle as well. And 38. So this was viewing the inside of the car, looking through the window, is that
Through the
correct?
window, yes.
Okay. And what did you notice down here in the passenger seat?
What caught my attention when I first saw it was the color of the bottle, which was the same color as the color of the glass that was on scene in the spout.
And so these again are looking through into the car. You
Yes.
did not make entry into the car in
No,
detail?
no.
Okay. And that was 38 and 39 for the record. This is number 40. 41. 42.
This was also, well,
This is photo 43 for the record. So
yeah,
this,
it's like a blue comforter, which was one of the things that we were told that.
Stain.
and photo 44. And this has that same Ashley Farrow name on
Yeah,
it,
some
correct?
kind of receipt, like a prescription or something.
45. And on this picture here, you can actually see the interior passenger door. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And could you see the blood stain over here on the door from the exterior?
Yeah, there's blood on the front passenger seat, on this here, this, kind of see a little bit of the stains here on the seat, and I believe also over here on the inside of the door.
And those stains are better documented in the next set of photographs you were just reviewing, correct?
Yes.
Oh, so we'll get to those in a minute. So going to 46. And there's a butter knife down there. Did that have any evidentiary significance?
Well, we knew the victim was stabbed, but that did not appear to be the murder weapon. We didn't think it was a murder weapon.
And now this is number 47. We talked about Inktel. Is this the business that you had been at earlier, this Inktel?
That elder was that, yes.
And that's the Miami Lakes address.
Yes, ma'am.
Continuing on from 48, 49, 50, 51, conditions down here. What are these?
That's evidence tape, and that was done prior to getting the vehicle towed to the west substation, which is where we executed the search warrant. And that's signed by one of the crime scene.
Okay. That was done in all 4 doors.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's going through 56, 57, 58. 59, and finally 60, which is that same butter knife again, correct?
Yes, sir.
So now going on to the next set of photographs that we have, we are on May 3rd of 2014, is that correct?
Yeah, that was, I believe, the next day.
3rd. What are we looking at here in this picture?
This building is the West Substation, which is off of, just north of Miramar Parkway on 186. And we do training. It's kind of like a training facility there. We have a gun range and we do in-house training at this building. And these are 2 garage doors.
And right here we have some more of this red tape. What is that?
Evidence tape again, so to indicate to other people that this is off limits, not to go in.
Was this sealed up on May 2nd of 2014?
Yes, ma'am. And that was, by the way, that sign, that was my handwriting.
Okay.
That's another door to that facility there.
Okay.
And this is on the inside. From the inside to the garage, there's another door, and we put evidence tape, and again, that's the sign that I put in there.
Okay. Now we're on photo 8. Again, that's your handwriting there?
Yeah, on the sign.
You should have been a doctor. Okay. Number 9. So we're looking at that same vehicle, but inside of the Miramar storage facility.
Yes, ma'am.
Has any changes, alterations, deletions, any cleaning been done of the car between when we saw it in Miami Lakes and seeing it here?
No.
Twelve, 13, 14, 15. What are we looking at in this picture?
Serial number of the vehicle. I believe that's when the doors open.
Okay. 16, okay, so now 17, we're inside the vehicle at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. 18, again, inside the vehicle.
Yes.
That's a better orientation for it. Okay. 19, inside the vehicle.
Yep.
20, this is the Intel Miami Lakes. 21. 22. And this is showing the same seals are intact.
Yes, ma'am.
24. Now, this is further back on the seat than it was in the last picture. Why is it back there?
Probably when it was
Objection,
moved.
cause for speculation.
If you know.
I can only tell you that when the vehicle gets towed, that it goes up on an angle. I mean, we've all had a car towed before, and
Okay. So this is not, the car is not driven to the Miramar Police Station on the road?
No.
It is put up on a flatbed and
Yes.
hauled over there?
Yes.
Okay. Photograph number 25.
And actually even dragged into that spot.
Okay. Now 26. Here, on the back of the passenger seat that we're looking at right here. Were these, what, some of the other suspect blood stains that you
Yes,
saw?
ma'am.
There's the bottle down at the bottom?
On the seat and also on the floorboard of the car, on the passenger side.
That is photo
I'm not
27.
blocking you, am I?
I can see that.
27 for the record. So 28, so we have the stain again there. 29.
Yes.
30. 31. 32. 33, 34. Now, the bottle stout that was recovered on scene, do you recall the brand of it? Not going to focus. Yingling. Okay. 35, more. Another blood stain or suspect blood stain. 36. Do you recall what this was here?
It was it's an alcohol, I can't remember exactly, I don't know if it was brandy or Hennessy or something like that.
Okay. 37. And this where we're seeing a couple more small fragments of the beer bottle.
Yes.
38. 39. 40. What is this showing?
I believe that's the roof of the car, the inside.
41.
Same thing.
42. Center console.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this permanently fixed in that position?
No, you can move it up or down.
And there are bottle caps right there?
Yes, ma'am.
And overhead view of the same center console?
Yes, ma'am.
That was 43. 44. Zoomed in too much. What are we looking at here?
It's there's a blue comforter, and I believe that was a toolbox.
And what section of the vehicle is all of this located in?
That was in the rear of the car.
45, same thing. 46, that is the rear passenger door.
Yes, ma'am.
47. 48, what side of the car we move to now?
That's the driver's side looking towards the passenger.
49. 50. 51, that's stain again that we mentioned earlier. 52. What are we looking at here?
I believe that's the driver's door. I mean, the driver's seat.
And is there pieces of glass here?
I believe so, yeah. Good job.
Okay. 54.
I think that's the rear.
On the driver's side.
Yes, ma'am.
55, that Ashley Farrow receipt again.
Yes.
56. 57, so this picture is actually taken from the back seat looking towards the front.
Yes.
58. 59.
Trunk of the car.
These are not the camo pants that were recovered on scene, correct? 60. Now we have all these markers and numbers on them. So we have, what are these numbers associated with?
I'm not a crime scene tech, but from my experience and training, what they do is they assign numbers to certain evidence that they're going to collect. That way they know when it's sent to the lab or they have a reference point. And then this is just like a little ruler that they use to kind of measure the size of, for example, on a stain or blood droplet to show kind of like the size of it.
So it's a scale for that.
Right,
Okay.
to show a scale.
So in this particular, we have stain 7 and then stain 5 down there, correct? And this is showing stains 1, 2, 3 as they were labeled by crime scene in photo 61. Same in photo 62. 63, 64, more of a close-up on it. 65, 66. Close-up on, skip them, not going to put on, but 67, 68, 69. Stain 4 is indicated here. 70, 71. 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, and stain 6, stain 7, 78, 7, 78. It's on 79. This has a 7 referring back to stain 7. Do you know what this testing is?
That is a presumptive test. They have them for like blood and also like narcotics. You basically swab. If it's blood, they swab a little section of it, put it in this little kit. There's usually a little vial inside that they snap, and if it turns a certain color, it indicates that it's blood.
So for example, photo 78 shows that this has turned a blue color versus photo number 134 where it has remained clear. From that, and you testified to this jury that if it turns blue, that means it was a presumptive test positive for blood.
Positive for blood, yes.
And if it stays clear, like on this one, it is
It means that, no.
78, so 79, so then 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, showing the interior of the car and labeled stains there.
Sure.
85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94. On photograph number 94, are you able to determine from those last 3 letters what brand of beer that portion is?
Yeah, actually, there's more of a label here.
And is that consistent with the spout that was found on scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. 95, letter B of said label. 96, 97, 98, and this is a presumptive positive for blood on stain 11. Same with stain 12 on photograph 99. 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, it's hard to see up here. 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125 for the record, 126, 127, 128, 129, 130, 131, 132, 133, 134, 135, 136, 137, 138, 139, 140, 141, 142, 143, 144, 145, 146, 147, 140, no, we skipped. 148, 149, and 149, what are we looking at here?
Vehicle registration to actually bear.
And is that the plate that we saw earlier?
Yes.
Okay. 150, this is that same visitor's pass.
Yes, ma'am.
151, back seat. 152, that's the contents of the center console.
Yes, ma'am.
153, 154, and then this was one that wasn't numbered, so we're going to put this one as 155. Oh. Gripping, compelling photographs, thank you. Okay. So now that we've covered May 2nd and May 3rd, now is a good time for a restroom break, right?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break for about 15 minutes, okay? Everybody throw some water on their face, stretch. And remember, don't talk about the case among yourselves.
Can I go to the restroom now?
Oh, absolutely, I'm sorry. I always forget the public.
throw this away.
Are you okay down there? Everything all right?